This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on. No choice but to get on. Mandate, get on. Welcome to the best hour in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla. It's Mark Garrigus.
In the studio. Couldn't be happier. You're back from Texas.
Oh, my God. I had it's been such a long time since I flew on your private jet. I had angina last night. I was sitting on my sofa, and I said, I'm going to see Mark tomorrow. And then I thought, you must have seen Mark and not thanked him for the flight on his private jet.
That's okay.
It's been a long time.
It's been weeks since you
were. And it hasn't. I have not seen you. So now I'm officially here to say, my God, that was so awesome.
But doesn't it? Everybody can say what they want and how obnoxious it is, and I don't care because at my advanced age, the idea of going through airports and wasting an entire day and everything else. And I'm thinking, I got to get the thing for maintenance to Florida anyway. Why wouldn't Adam go there? And it made it one stop to Texas, right?
One stop.
Yeah.
It was and can I tell you, I have flown on some big private jets, and I've flown on some small private jets. You know, people don't understand private jet. You can say private jet like you could say sports car, but we could be talking about a Miata or we could be talking about a Ferrari. There's a lot of room in that private jet title.
So true.
And the private jet, and I've flown on some big ones, I've flown on some. Jimmy and I flew one to New Orleans once when we're going there for Mardi Gras for a man show bit. And I remember climbing into that thing going, this is a private jet. Like I can barely stand. I have to squat. You know, the toilet's in the back. It's a hammock that you have to convert over to whatever.
I will tell you, I'll reminisce it. When I first got that one, I've got another, but that's about
I think it's about a 6-person.
6-person, right. And you can do it with a single pilot. It's a Cessna CJ1. But the first time I got it, I was representing Chris Brown. And we had that Washington, D.C. case, the one where he was accused of assault. And there was like a warrant out or something like that. And I said, Chris, the jet is there. I'll meet you over at the airport. We can fly overnight to get there and do whatever. He got inside of this particular one, and he shot out of that because of the claustrophobia like I shot out of his Lamborghini once. I mean, it was the same kind of just being propelled because of the whatever. But I think that's one of the most practical ones around because it's got a good, the mission is you can get to Texas, you can get to Canada, you can get to San Francisco. I take it back and forth to Utah when I was in trial there. And it sips gas and it's practical.
I got to tell you, so I've had a few bumpy rides because normally the smaller the jet, the bumpier the climb out and descent in. Silky smooth, 38,000 feet the whole time, like butter. I mean, now the problem is we had to get off of that jet. And then we went into Texas, and we flew southwest back. So it was
that's a good yin and yang, isn't it?
My God, the yinniest and the yangiest.
In fact, that's about as good a rich man, poor man as you can do in the span of 48 hours.
Well, not only so there was getting dropped off at the Burbank airport, sitting in the lounge, having a spiked seltzer, walking out onto the plane, and just leaving. The way back was, meet in the lobby at 7 a.m., fly. We had to drive the rental car from San Antonio to Austin, and then drop the rental car off, and then fly Southwest back to LAX. So I was back. I was literally brought back down to earth on the flight back. But anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
It was spectacular, and we had the time of our life on that flight in. I got to tell you,
I love it. Now you know what's breaking. I had told. It's funny how this week has evolved, and Gary and I. For those who don't know, we text back and forth with great frequency about various stories. And one of the things that I thought I wanted to talk about, we'll just save and put in the hopper, which was this published opinion on a school's case where they confirmed a guidance counselor's firing, which is astonishing, but I won't even get into that because you and I will talk about it for an hour. I was more interested in, at the beginning of this week, the argument, because we followed the Flynn case greatly. So as those who are in the weeds know, Judge Sullivan had set a hearing. He's the trial judge, the Article 3 judge. He'd set a hearing on the government's motion to dismiss the case against Flynn. And Flynn took what's called a writ to the Court of Appeal, the D.C. court, and in a 2-1 decision, the court ordered Judge Sullivan not to do the hearing, basically, but just to dismiss the case. And basically, it was a separation of powers argument, and that the government's got the authority to bring the charge, the government's got the authority to dismiss the charge, and they didn't really address, in that opinion, I thought, with any kind of intellectual honesty or consistency, the fact that what Judge Flynn was concerned about was this idea that somebody had pled guilty, stipulated to a factual basis under oath, and he wanted to know, well, what's transpired since this guy sat and did this. So after that 2-1 decision, people, as they always do, it gets reported breathlessly, and I think we talked about it here. I said, this isn't over yet. Wait, they're going to do what's called an en banc. And sure enough, they did. And that's where the Judge Sullivan asked that the entire circuit, not just 3 judges, but all of the circuit, hear it. Sure enough, and what usually happens, it's a very rare occurrence, but if you've got a dissenting opinion, 2-1, usually the dissent will attract some other votes on the circuit, and it did. And they did the hearing this week. And Gary, I think, has got one little snippet of Judge Millett with the gentleman's name who was arguing, the Solicitor General. What's his name, Gary? Is it Wall?
Yeah, it is. I believe it might be Corey, but it's Wall is his last name.
Wall is the last name. So there's a little bit of a colloquy. This case is, as we're taping this, has not been decided yet.
The Solicitor General is also probably a Danny Kaye movie title from like the 50s. Do you remember that?
Yes.
What happened to Danny Kaye?
Danny Kaye lived a long time. He was like, all those guys, Art Linkletter, Danny Kaye, Summer Redstone. There's a lot of guys.
All the
greats, right? They all get into the Kirk Krikorian. You can see these guys with some good genetics.
Oh, Danny Kaye was an Armo.
Yeah.
He was, huh?
Yeah,
they had like red hair.
Yeah, Summer wasn't, but certainly Kirk was. And Mike Connors, who was born J. O'Hanian. Also,
oh, really?
90s.
The rifleman?
No, Mike Connors was Mannix.
Oh, Mannix was Mike Connors.
Yeah.
Who?
Mike Connors.
Jim Connors? Who was the rifleman?
That was, God.
Brett Connors. God damn it.
I can picture the guy, too.
Yeah, anyway, sorry.
Gary.
Sorry, Gary.
I think the rifleman was Chuck Connors?
Chuck Connors, exactly.
Damn it.
Who also played baseball, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't he like a first baseman for the Angels?
Chuck Connors was a professional baseball player. He became an actor.
Professional basketball player.
And became the rifleman.
Good-looking guy.
Also,
very
I think
telegenic.
if bizarre memory serves, one of the first guys with like a weird bootleg sex tape, like
really
60s, 50s, 60s era. Like,
did Maxwell Smart have a sex tape too? No, I know who it was. It was the guy from Hogan's Heroes. He had Bob Crane.
Well, Bob Crane. He directed and produced.
Yeah,
he was making those movies. But
yeah, but his always were kind of dark. But who would have thought Hogan's Heroes?
It had to be such a weird, dicey time, and it's in a movie. But had to be such a weird time when you're playing this Disney dad characters. Like the
what was the name of the
DA
guy from the Love Bug who was in all
Fred
of those?
McMurray. They'd have a lot of those kind of guys, like always the dad, of the wacky family and stuff, the G-rated and beyond. And now, but you have this kind of alternate life of bootleg filming sex tapes and orgies and stuff. And Disney's got to go, we'd like to hire you.
Disney wanted Annette Funicello to stay in. I won't even go there. Gary, you going to play this, or are we going down the Disney? We're going down the yellow brick road.
But I'm telling you, there's got to be a Chuck Connors bootleg porn tape or something that's out there. That's a weird, grainy
from the 40s.
From the 40s.
So it says.
Oh, look, Gary is.
I'm admittedly doing this all very much in the moment.
Right. So let's play it. Let's play it, and we'll figure out the Chuck Connors thing later.
You want me to play the sex tape?
No. Play the from the 40s.
Following up on that question from Judge Griffith, in other criminal cases, and Cheney wasn't a criminal case. In other criminal cases, when there's been a question to dismiss or not, and courts have, I'm thinking of United States versus Armstrong, crack cocaine, and whether there was racial bias in the prosecution. And when the district court insisted over the government's objection on discovery that the government didn't want to do, it just said, no, we cannot comply. Go ahead and enter judgment against us, and we'll appeal. And when I try to understand your harms here, sometimes in the briefs it sounds like you want mandamus against Mr. Gleason and his arguments. But at this point, we don't know what the district court would ask. We don't know what the district court would insist upon. Even if the district court asks something and you say, we're not going to answer because of privilege or separation of powers, you can just do that. There's nothing that compels you, as in Cheney, to start turning over documents. But you can just say we refuse to comply. As the government does, I won't say commonly, but not uncommonly. It says, fine, rule against us and we'll take our appeal. Why isn't that? There's nothing here that requires you to disclose. You don't have to respond to every argument made by Mr. Gleason. Government doesn't respond to every argument an opposing amicus or party makes. So you say what you said already. We stand on our filing. We will say no more. And if the court thinks that's a basis to rule against us, we'll take our appeal. Would that process not protect you against any separation of powers injury? I
don't think it would, Judge Millett. 2 points. One, as you know, Armstrong is an exception to the normal rules justified by the Equal Protection Clause, and even that exception is a very tightly cabined one. It sets up a very high hurdle, and only where you've got clear evidence of an unconstitutional motive. We don't have anything like that here.
I'm talking about the process for the government to avoid injury. I'm not talking about the constitutional issue there versus here. I'm talking about the process for the government to avoid injuries.
For a second, Gary. So who's going back and forth?
So that's Judge Millett, is it not, Gary? Because I'm not watching the Zoom. I'm watching the
female judge.
Listening, female judge. Who's exactly her point is exactly the point that I was trying to make to you a couple of weeks ago. This is not the subject normally. I mean, if some client said, I want to take a writ, a writ is an extraordinary vehicle to go to the Court of Appeal to get them to order something, and she's got it exactly right. Why are we doing a writ? Why are we kind of calling a timeout, doing this immediately? If you don't like what the judge is doing, tell him basically, she's saying, just tell him to pound sand. We're not complying with your order, and we'll take it up on appeal. That's what the government normally does. Everything about this Flynn case is so extraordinary at every side. The judge hiring a lawyer, Judge Sullivan hiring a lawyer, the district court making the order to appoint an amicus, the Court of Appeal issuing a 2-to-1 opinion on mandamus, the in-bank. I mean, you could not predict this as anything that's within the mainstream.
Where's all the energy coming from? Like, it seems to me like they got Flynn. Then they realized that it was kind of a perjury trap or something, and then Flynn's guys went, hey, dismiss it, let's move on. Where's all the energy coming from? Why is this so important, or is it?
It's very important, and we'll
mean?
Get to it because we're going to unpack it over the course of this hour. It's very important for a number of reasons. If you practice in the federal criminal arena, what is happening here is unprecedented. So that's part of the energy. I mean, a district court judge generally never encounters something like this. A court of appeal never grapples with stuff like this. When I say never, the case that they cite later in this audio, but we don't need to listen to all of it, is Fucker, F-O-K-K-E-R. And Fucker is a case that deals with some of this. So where is the energy? Well, Flynn got some wind at his back. Normally, when somebody pleads guilty, they're defeated. They can't afford it anymore. You know, in Flynn's case, I don't care which side you're on. It's apparent that they threatened his son.
Right.
And for every left-wing comrade of mine who says, well, he pled guilty not once but twice, I say, yeah, I'd like to see what you would do. I've been there. I know what the kind of heart-wrenching decision when somebody's in the face of this kind of maelstrom and they're threatening your kid. What are you going to do? Say, no, fuck it, take my kid?
It's so funny, especially coming from the left, where you just hear, like, he fled, Stone, he pled guilty. Because he was threatening. He was threatening the witness. He pled guilty, and Flynn, he pled guilty. It's like, you guys were always the champions of the person who pled guilty because they were sort of forced to plead guilty. And not technically because they pled guilty. It's such a crazy
upside down world. And then, look, I can go onto the other side. Where's the energy on the other side? Where were all of these people who are defending Flynn and his right to expose this? Which, more power to you. I mean, obviously, that's what I do for a significant portion of my living. But you know, I've been complaining about the Utah case and the Utah trial. You realize in that Utah case, just for an example, I want to give you kind of a counterpoint. They're talking about Flynn. They're talking about, was the FBI a problem? Was the FBI a problem? I've got an FBI agent in my case who was just indicted here in the Central District. I've got a ICE agent, Homeland Security, who's been indicted in that case. We've got a Department of Transportation person who has been indicted. We've got every agency where they've been indicted. Nobody's, I don't see Bill Barr coming in here and, and saying, we better appoint somebody like Dunham to examine this. So there's a great deal of frustration for those of us who are in the weeds or in the trenches. But now what has happened is we heard today, just now, Gary, you want to read that little thing that as we're taping this, do you have that, what I just sent?
The story about the FBI lawyer, Kevin Clinesmith?
Yeah, Kevin Clinesmith, who was a lawyer at the FBI. Mind you, in my case, I've already got a guy who's been indicted. Here's a guy who just, as we're talking right now today, just is reported to be entering a plea. FBI lawyer Kevin Clinesmith, who was working with Peter Strzok, has just entered a plea in the Dunham investigation.
Why does he enter a plea?
Because if you believe what's been reported, and I'm sure more will come out over the weekend, he says, or what's been reported so far, and you never know because, as I've said a million times, when these first come out, it's generally law enforcement who's leaking it to get ahead of the story, although I'm a little surprised it's done on a Friday because I'll tell you where this is headed shortly. The reason I did is I think he wants to cooperate, okay? And it's always, Gary, it's one plea, right? One count?
So far, yes.
One count.
Hold on. Keep talking. I'm going to turn the air on.
And by the way, while Adam does that, I'll just clean up a little bit that I had said that the first name of Solicitor General Wall incorrectly. His first name is Jeff, and that's the other side of that audio with Judge Millett.
Oh, got it. And I thought he handled himself with great aplomb. He was getting piled on. You listened to a lot of that audio, right?
Yeah, I mean that hearing goes 4 hours, and
yeah.
It's really impressive that anyone could stand up with the poise that he had through all of it. I did listen to quite a bit of it. We only listened to a minute or two.
Who
here.
are we talking about?
The Jeff Wall, who I was cleaning up his name. That's the name of the Solicitor General. I incorrectly said something else earlier. He's the male voice on that recording we were listening listening to. And that snippet you heard, Adam, comes from a 4-hour argument that was done.
And
over
he
Zoom.
was getting his head handed to him repeatedly, and I thought he handled himself with great aplomb. He didn't miss a beat. He was really good. I was very impressed. So your question is exactly where we were headed. Why would the FBI lawyer, somebody if you're a lawyer for the FBI, you've obviously your career arc is, I'm in law enforcement. I'm not earning a fortune. I've decided public service is my end game, and I want to do good. Presumably, you're one of the good guys. That's kind of your motivation. So for this guy to plead, even if it's right, Gary reported to be at least one count, correct?
So far, yes.
And I'm going to guess, I haven't seen the plea agreement. I'll bet you it's what's called a cooperation agreement, which means that his sentence is going to depend on his cooperation. I can guarantee you also that they have already gotten either an attorney proffer or he has sat down with the prosecutors and told them who he could provide evidence on, who he could cooperate against.
Well, I got to do a quick spot here, but as we've been talking about for a couple of years now, there's more meat on this bone than we realize, or the general society realizes.
I've mea culpa for a year and a half. I didn't give you short shrift. I gave you short shrift on this. I said, Adam, come on, and I poo-pooed it, and you've been vindicated.
I'll explain how I know this or what's going on. First, I'll tell you about Oracle and NetSuite. America's ready to get back to work, but how do you win in the new economy? You need every advantage. Smart companies run on NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. With NetSuite, you'll have visibility and control over financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more, all in one place. Whether you're doing $1 million in business or hundreds of millions in sales, doesn't matter. NetSuite gives you the visibility to control and manage every single penny. Join the 20,000+ companies who trust NetSuite. These guys are great sponsors, and if you want to run your business, you'll use NetSuite by Oracle. Right, Gary?
That's right. NetSuite surveyed hundreds of business leaders and assembled a playbook of the top strategies they're using as America reopens for business. Receive your free guide, 7 actions businesses need to take now, and schedule your free product tour at netsuite.com/doubt. Get your free guide and schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/doubt. netsuite.com/doubt.
So there's been a handful of guys. I think Greg Jarrett is one of them. There's a couple of names out there. Tom Fenton. There's been a couple reporters have been on this for about 3 years. And the mainstream that's just Jim Acosta going, the president said he was spied on. That's a lie. That's how he reports, but he's not basing it on anything. He's just basing it on Trump being an idiot and don't believe that guy and whatever. So it hasn't really, there's been nothing on the CNN and the MSNBCs or ABC or NBC or whatever. And it's not even been something that Tucker Carlson's really been into. But there's a handful of guys on Fox that have been into this. And they've been reporting on it for about 3 years. And each time they've made some proclamation, it's been correct. So it's like they say something, and you switch over to CNN, and they go, oh, this is nonsense. These guys are just talking out of their ass. Nothing exists. No smoke, no fire. And then it does turn out to happen. So I kept noticing this pattern of these handful of guys that were reporting on Fox that were getting it right all throughout. So I started to go, I think there's a theme emerging here, and there's more going on. And, of course, the mainstream is just sort of, Trump's just up there yammering into a mic.
The mainstream, as you call it, I've been, before there was even any thought of Trump being president, I used to write and lecture on the idea of what has happened with journalism in the criminal law. Back in the early 2000s, I used to say, I remember a time when I was growing up when journalists' job was to question authority. Journalists' job was to kind of hold the prosecutor's feet to the fire. At some point that flipped, and I think it was post-OJ, and the journalism became kind of a cheerleader for the prosecution and kind of a cheerleader for the what I call the status quo.
Well, it became a cheerleader for whatever side you were on.
Yeah.
So, whoever, it's not necessarily for the prosecution, So CNN was simultaneously cheering on the Barr Russia probe, or the Mueller. They were cheering on the Russia probe for 3 years while simultaneously poo-pooing the part where the FBI got the FISA warrant, the Carter Page stuff and all. They were saying, nah, don't worry about that. Focus on this. Well, they're both just investigations.
Well,
so
also,
if you're for an investigation,
problem,
you should be for all the investigations, and the right does the same thing.
Yeah, they do it. Both sides do the exact same thing. If you had this much scrutiny on almost any prosecution, you'd find out how hinky it is. One of the reasons it's almost dispelling this kind of blind childlike naivete I've had in the system, that the system is going to right itself, that the system is fundamentally broken. And what you now find in this instance, and in virtually every case that you get, I mean, it's a rare. We were just talking the other day in the office about two prosecutors who actually, in the face of it was a woman that I know in Cook County, Patricia, who a judge, former U.S. attorney. She made her bones. She made her career off of walking into her supervisor's office and saying, "I'm not proceeding on this case." And the supervisor said, "Well, you mean you don't have, I'll have reassign it." She says, "No, I'm not going to prosecute this person. This is unjust. I don't know why we're doing it." That's the exception to the rule. I mean, in this case now, what happened was there was kind of a wink and a nod with Flynn's attorneys to deep six some of the information, because what people don't talk about, Flynn had a co-defendant when he was indicted. That co-defendant went to trial and was actually, the jury found him guilty. People don't talk about that. The trial judge in that other case did something that rarely happens. He granted a motion to throw that verdict out in the same prosecution because he found it to be, basically, he called judicial bullshit. They go and they get the notes. They see that the firm had deep sixed the fact that they had agreed not to prosecute Flynn's son. We heard about that. Now what was declassified this week in the last couple of days are notes that the FBI and the intelligence agencies had done a briefing with Trump, Flynn, and Chris Christie. They'd done that briefing at Trump Tower, 13-minute briefing, and they had told him about Russia and China. Well, that was never disclosed. That was always classified. It's now declassified. That's part of the issues that the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, had found in the investigation of the Carter Page, as you just mentioned. Now, fast forward to, in that same argument that Gary listened to for 4 hours, what Wall was saying is there's more to this than you understand. He's telling the judges. And we don't necessarily want to reveal what it is. Now, a cynic would say, oh, he's just trying to say that, trust me, I'm the government. Well, as it turns out, they've got somebody, an FBI lawyer, who pleads. And if he's cooperating, who do you think? Who would be the logical subject for him to cooperate against? Gary, do you have a tape here? And what year was this?
Oh, yes, I do.
With Chris Wallace?
Sorry, I do have a tape here. Yeah, so the first portion of this tape that you'll hear is from a Fox News interview in December of 2019. But a few seconds into the tape, he then plays a tape from 2018.
Okay, and so and by the way, I'm not a Fox News aficionado fan or anything else, but Chris Wallace, to my mind, does some of the best interviews of anybody, and it does. Doesn't get
Chris
enough
Wallace. He does, and he also, I think, I'm not sure. I always kind of look at everything from a sort of psychodynamic thing. I think he understands that he's working under the Fox banner, and that sometimes he's like an he's like an umpire who's going to call his own kid out every once in a while, even when he's safe, just so we don't have this idea that, oh, come on, he's just a homer who's getting his son on base. Like, 'cause he will say things that are to the left of CNN sometimes, just to try to establish, okay, so you can come to me and you'll get your unbiased report.
It's a very apt analogy. So what you'll hear here is a December 2019 interview, and then you'll hear Chris Wallace throwing to a December 2018
Who's he
tape.
speaking to?
That's part of the reveal.
Sorry.
Yes.
There we
go. And by the way, this is part of, if I'm making a case or an argument, this is part of who I think the FBI lawyer is cooperating on. Because if you're a lawyer for the FBI and you're cooperating, that means you're going up the food chain, right?
Right.
And here is what you said about the FISA process and what the Inspector General Horowitz said this week. Take a look.
I have total confidence that the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI.
We identified significant inaccuracies and omissions in each of the 4 applications. 7 in the first application and a total of 17 by the final renewal application.
17 significant errors in the FISA process, and you say that it was handled in a thoughtful and appropriate way.
Yeah, he's right. I was wrong. I was overconfident in the procedures that the FBI and Justice had built over 20 years. I thought they were robust enough. It's incredibly hard to get a FISA. I was overconfident in those because he's right. There was real sloppiness. 17 things that either should have been in the applications or at least discussed and characterized differently. It was not acceptable. And so he's right. I was wrong.
But you make it sound like you're a bystander, an eyewitness. You were the director of the FBI while a lot of this was going on, sir.
Yeah. That's where Chris Wallace is telegraphing. You act like you're a bystander. Combine that when he says, oh, yeah, he was right, I was wrong, with the fact that the FBI lawyer has now pled and is presumably cooperating. If I'm representing Jim Comey, I'm saying to Jim, we have got you red flag, red alert.
Really?
Yeah. And by the way,
meaning they're coming after you.
Well, they've been talking for the last 45 days, maybe longer, that Barr has got what they call an October surprise, and supposedly, in the last 90 days before an election, Department of Justice has policy that they don't do anything that may influence the election. I'm going to call bullshit on that because the plea that is today. Portends to me, is an indication to me that they're going up the food chain, and the logical person is just what Chris Wallace just said there. You act like you're a bystander.
Well, Comey, according to the aforementioned reporting I'd been watching for the last 3 years, they always said Comey is next, or not next, but they said Comey is in the most jeopardy, and he was making his book tour and making the rounds, and the people were clapping, and he was enjoying himself, but they're like, enjoy it while you can because it's going to get to you, and so they got to Strzok and Page, they're going to get to Comey, and the question is, do they keep going? Does it go to, I don't know, Susan Rice? Was it Susan Rice had been there, or Obama or Biden? Biden said, I didn't know anything about it. And then Biden said, oh, well, I knew something about it, but I didn't know what you were asking me. And it seems to me that what Trump is doing is saying, you guys essentially ruined my presidency because we had this ongoing investigation for 3/4 of my his presidency would be Russian collusion, and then that gave way to a brief Ukraine, and then COVID, and then you're out, and Biden's in. He's got to be sitting around feeling like whatever you think of Trump, it feels like he wasn't president for 4 years. It was like
have you watched him in the last week? In the last week, he looks like a defeated guy. He's not the same guy. I was saying up until January, boy, he looks better now than he did when he started, which is contrary to almost every other president. But now he looks every day of his presidency.
It's also like it's literally just 3 years of Russia, 4 months of Ukraine, and 8 months of COVID-19, and you're out. Like, that's what it seems like. It's like he never.
Well, I'll go afield from the legal for a second. I think that right now he's on course to have the biggest landslide defeat that we've seen in a presidential election since Walter Mondale.
So I think what he's doing with Barr and Durham is going, hey, fellas, they jacked me out of 3/4 of my presidency. Now I want you to drop whatever else you're working on. The election's in 85 days. Go fucking get them.
Yeah, well, the irony of this is, DOJ policy, it's not law, says that you can't indict a sitting president, right? You've heard that argument before. But DOJ policy also says you're not supposed to do anything that interferes with the election 90 days before. What the ultimate would be, what if he, as individual number one in that Southern District indictment of Michael Cohen, what if, as individual number one, or where I think he's got real jeopardy is the Manhattan DA's office. I mean, the Manhattan DA's office, he not only can't pardon his way out of that because it's a state case, but they let on that part of what when they were litigating this in the last week, they also filed something saying they were looking at a criminal course of conduct with him. So that's another thing to add into this. Remember, all of his finances have been under scrutiny, and now it's been reported that apparently Deutsche Bank cooperated. So he's got to be saying to himself, he looks like it's sunk in the last month to me. It looks like this is a guy who has just the weight of what is happening to him has finally kind of met him.
I think he probably thought, as was tradition in this country, I think he thought we're going to have this slog and this battle, and then once the election is settled and once they count the Electoral College votes, then everything was going to stop, and then he was going to move on and start being the president. And he did not enjoy that privilege. It was just, it's like an argument. It's like you're arguing in the car, and you thought, well, once we get to Disneyland, we can stop arguing. And once you walk through the gates, and you just argued on the Matterhorn, and you argued on the teacups, and you argued on the Pirates. It's like it doesn't end anymore. It's a cycle.
And when you realize that, and when it comes out, I mean, take a look at the fact that Mary Trump comes out with a book, the fact that now Michael Cohen, I watched yesterday. Did you see the golden shower episodes that they're promoting for Vegas and everything else? I mean, and that is going to come out in September as well. I mean, it is a food fight shit show of just proportions we've never seen before.
It's such a crazy appetite. Like as someone who came out with a book about the time that Mary Trump did, I think she sold 750,000.
I think it was
units.
more than that. I think she did 900,000 units. It's insane.
Well, this was like pre-sale.
Oh, pre-sale. You're probably right. Yeah.
She had 950 sold by the end of the first day. So combining pre-sale and that first day.
I mean, that's just talk about how crazy that is.
Well, again, if you can sell 100,000, if you can sell 50,000 books in this new world order, you're doing quite well this as well.
She sold 1.35 million by the end of the first week.
That's just
that's astonishing, and it's so crazy the appetite, because it's like everybody who's buying that book already hates Trump and realizes he's a douchebag and wants nothing to do with it. But for me, it's like it's all stuff you already know. It's already stuff that's been said. It's just going to confirm every single thing you've ever heard about Trump, and it's a crazy appetite.
It's an endless, but it happens on both sides. I remember during Clinton, because the Clinton used to drive the right as crazy as the left gets driven by Trump. I know people don't understand that, but having lived through it, I used to watch the same thing. In fact, it's virtually all the same players, just kind of recast as to who's the villain, who's the good guy, depending on whose ox is getting gored. And it's really like nothing I've ever seen, though, in terms of the monetization of it.
I would love to count the books. Like, well, first off, I've seen the charts because my book's on the bestseller, or was bestsellers on the bestseller list of political humor. So I'll go check and see how the rank is. There's 1,000 Trump's a douche books on there. And I was trying to think, like, if you go back to Obama, there was a couple of, Dinesh D'Souza would write some book called Obama's a Fraud or whatever, or a documentary or something. There was a smattering of those kind of things. It is now an avalanche. And the question would be, and I couldn't imagine it, but is this going to continue? So when Biden becomes the president, there's going to be a few books. I don't think there's going to be 1,000 books. I don't think he can support 1,000.
Yeah, he can't,
books.
But Kamala can.
Oh,
Kamala
what do you know about Kamala?
Look, we've talked about her on this show before. I know her well. I contributed to her. I think I attended her wedding reception. And it's interesting because I've been a critic at times because of the way that her positions have evolved. She's a prosecutor. When she was an attorney general, we had cases against each other. And when I say against each other, not her personally, but her office. But she sets the tone for the office. And there was a lot of things I vehemently disagreed with. As a U.S. senator, though, and we've talked about it on this show, you put her up against the woman from Hawaii when they were both crossing.
Hirona.
Yeah, I mean, it's light years apart.
Oh.
I mean, it's not. You can't even talk about it. I mean, and I think part of it is I think Kamala she was a line deputy DA.
Mazie Hirono seems like Edith Bunker from All in the Family, like just glazed over, like going, I don't think what Trump does is right because he's wrong because of the people that he hurts. But look, it's one thing. Like you can go see. My whole thing is like Kamala Harris, Jim Jordan, opposite sides of the aisle, but they both have strong intellects.
Well,
the guys that scare me are the vacant dingbats that we have there.
I say all the time to people, Ratcliffe, who I just mentioned, who's now the director of national intelligence, who I couldn't disagree with more on virtually every single issue, but at the same time, I can watch him do what I consider a cross in a House hearing, and I can say this guy's got chops. I watched, and we played it, I think, on the show. I said, Kamala, she knows how to cross-examine. She was a line prosecutor. She knows how to cross-examine.
Very skilled.
Anybody who thinks and says that Pence is going to clean her in a debate is so delusional. I'll also, play the tape again. The idea that Pence is going to debate her, if I were Pence...
Who's saying that? Are people saying that?
Yeah, I read it yesterday.
Really?
And I read it yesterday.
Pence is going to
clean her clock in a debate. And I just said, I don't even know what you're smoking. Anyway, but speaking of smoking, we've got a new sponsor who I just love. Sue the Collector. This is Jared's company, Gary.
Yeah, it is. I had a great Zoom meeting with him before we started this up, and he is quite fond of you.
I met him. And I think this is the great. I so want to channel this company. Sue the Collector. Over 40 million people are unemployed. That means unpaid bills, but it does not mean that debt collectors can be abusive in trying to collect the debt. No frickin' way. If a debt collector lies, is verbally abusive, or treats you unfairly, you don't have to put up with it. This is so appropriate. I've been in a grudge match with Amex all week. Get free help at suethecollector.com. Skilled consumer law attorneys will take your case, guess what, Gary? For free. They eliminate the debt you owe, pay you up to $1,000, and erase any errors on your credit report that were caused through no fault of your own. I mean, it's an unbelievable. Basically, they're taking it on a contingency. They're tying you up with consumer lawyers, which is a great idea. And there is nothing more abusive right now than most of these debt collectors, right, Gary?
That's absolutely right. Get a free attorney plus win up to $1,000 and get the debt erased forever. That's what the team at Sue the Collector can offer, and they never charge for their services. That's SueTheCollector.com.
So Kamala is very skilled.
Yeah, very skilled in the idea that somehow, I mean, there's so many things I'm going to call bullshit on. Number one, the idea that somehow the Democratic Party is not going to be charged up by Kamala. Okay, then you're delusional if you think that, because there isn't. All you got to do is turn on my Twitter feed or hear people chattering around. The Democrats are psyched up. They were not psyched up for Joe Biden. Let me just kind of tell you a little secret. Democrats were not psyched for Joe. When he puts Kamala on there, they're psyched. And so you can talk about whatever you want. And take a look at the polls. I mean, I don't know of anybody who's come back from this kind of a deficit and also losing in the swing states. That's why, like I said before, and throw this back up in my face on November 4th, but he's headed towards a monumental landslide of an electoral defeat.
What do you think of her? She's described in the press as moderate, but again, everything coming out of the press now is a sort of shaping and a narrative, because I think when you look at her record, she's definitely much more progressive than an average sort of middle-of-the-road moderate.
This is funny, and I'm sure you'll see this in TV ads. When she was a line deputy, I believe, in Alameda County. Then she ran for DA, and she beat Terrence Hallahan, who was kind of a venerated DA in San Francisco. Then she would not bring the death penalty for a cop killer in San Francisco. She was anti-death penalty. You know, remember, Dianne Feinstein famously was booed at a Democratic convention, and that's what she made her chops on years ago, 20 decades ago, for seeking the death penalty when the Democratic Party was anti-death penalty. But at the same time, when Kamala left the DA's office and ran for AG, she ran against Steve Cooley, who was the DA here in L.A. County for 3 terms. Cooley, on the night of the election, the Attorney General election, San Francisco Chronicle said he won. I mean, it was that close. Karl Rove led Cooley's campaign because the Republicans understood that she was a real problem. They did not want her profile to rise. She won as Attorney General. I disagreed with many of her positions on criminal justice, but law enforcement loved her. I mean, so you've got this kind of almost schizophrenic problem in attacking her. You're going to attack her on the death penalty issue when she was DA at San Francisco, but law enforcement was behind her. And by the way, she was excoriated in the Ninth Circuit several times for kind of prosecutorial misconduct under her underlings, not her personally. But I remember one particular, Gary will find it at some point, we'll discuss it. There's a Ninth Circuit argument where one of the justices is excoriating her office for covering up prosecutorial misconduct. And so for every time that you want to criticize her on one thing, she's got another thing that she could point to that says whatever. So she learned quickly that California is a strange place, as you well know. But for a politician and for the Democratic Party, for years, I mean, witness Exhibit A is 3 strikes, Exhibit B is anything else that you prosecute in California. For years, the Democrats were trying to outlaw and order the Republicans, and she was doing, I think there's an element of that when she was AG.
Well, she's super bright, she's super sharp, and I think she's a fine debater, and I don't see Pence winning those debates, depending on how they're moderated and what the questions are and things of that nature. But, I mean, he may win it on information. I don't know if he's going to get any style points. There's a way to kind of – it depends if you're sort of information-based or style-based.
Well, I always look at the pedigree. She's a trial lawyer, prosecutor, quick on it, which by definition, you got to be quick on your feet. You got to be able to roll with the punches and take it. He was a talk show host, and then he was governor, and he was in the House. Well, as a governor, he's got that executive experience. In the House, he was kind of I don't think he distinguished himself that much. But she was a senator. She went through these hearings. She knows what she knows the issues. But they're going to attack her, I think, on health care. I think she's going to she's had some missteps, if you will, on health care, and so they'll focus on that. But so far, I would not grade the Republican response as anything better than a C- in their attacks on her so far.
Yeah, well, because they have to pick a direction and go that direction, and she's schizophrenic, like you said. Like she's been too tough and then too liberal.
Exactly.
Simultaneously. So you can't attack both. It's kind of a fork in the road. You have to kind of pick.
You got to pick one. And I saw Pence, was it this morning, Gary? You've got to find it. Talking to, I want to find out what group he was talking to. He was talking about if you vote for Biden and Harris, you're going to vote to cut meat. It was just kind of a bizarre theme.
Now, my feeling with her is that she's incredibly shrewd. She's sharp. She's got a little edge to her, but I don't know what she stands for. Like I was saying that I felt like I knew who Jimmy Carter was, and I felt like I knew who Ronald Reagan was. And, by the way, in a modern-day version of that, and because I've had extended interviews with both of them, just to give you kind of a right and a left, if you go, I know who Andrew Yang is. That guy is that guy. You can agree with some and disagree with others, but that's just who he is.
You know who Bernie Sanders is.
I know who Bernie Sanders is. Ugh. But I know who he is.
but I mean,
But and there's Dan Crenshaw with the eye patch on the right, and those guys, they're both great guys. They're as far apart as you can get politically, but you know who they are, and they believe. I believe they believe what they believe. You know what I mean? And you could go, I agree with Dan Crenshaw on some of that. I agree with Andrew Yang on some of that, but I'm perfectly fine living in a world where there's that guy and then there's that guy. My problem with her is I don't know what she believes.
And part of that, I think the explanation for that is, when you're a line prosecutor in Alameda County, it's one thing. When you're a DA in San Francisco, it's another. When you're an AG, it's something else. When you're a senator, it's something else, and now VP. Part of what I think will evolve with her is people are going to project onto her what they want because it's a proxy for aggravation over Trump, or it's a proxy for is Biden past his time? Because that started to started to get some traction. The Biden past his
she's
prime.
Going to be. I mean, if he gets elected, 4 years, Biden is going to be older than Reagan was when he ended his second term. Then everyone's kept talking about how old he was and he's lost his fastball or whatever. Let me tell you another thing about Biden that just is I think you have to look through the prism. What he's gone through. I mean, he lost his first wife, and I believe his daughter in the accident. I know he lost his
29
wife.
or 30.
I know he lost his wife. I don't know if his daughter died as well. But,
and that's and he had two young boys, and he basically raised the boys until he married Dr. Jill. Then he's got Beau, who, by all accounts, was on a trajectory that was unbelievable when you think about it. I mean, that was a good-looking man. He was there with Kamala, by the way, in 2010, taking on the big banks post the meltdown of 2008. Maybe Gary look up and.
Sorry, I was looking up his kids. He lost his wife, his daughter, and then Beau as well.
Yeah, I mean that. I don't care what anybody says. You as a parent knows. I can't even fathom that. I just don't know how you get up in the morning, and that gives him a certain degree of. First of all, it gives you a certain degree of empathy. At the same time, that cuts your souls in ways that I don't even know how to imagine. And he lost Beau recently, and in the attacks on Hunter, his last remaining kid. Have got to affect him. That ages you. I don't care what anybody says. So he looks to me to be fit, but clearly He has he lost a step? I don't know, a 77 or 78-year-old who hasn't combined kind of the life story that he's lived, and that makes it even worse.
I can see
I think
her.
he does, actually, just to correct that, I think he does have one other child still alive, Ashley, a daughter who's stayed pretty much out of the limelight. And when you guys are ready, I have that Pence clip of the...
Yeah, can you show that?
Ashley's like that Kardashian we don't know about.
Well, there was also a Bush there. Yeah, right? Yes. Very good, Adam.
All right, play the Pence clip.
Sure, here we go.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would bury the economy under an avalanche of red tape, more regulation, and more bureaucracy. In fact, the California senator that he named as his running mate this week said during her short campaign for president that Americans needed to be, and I quote, educated about the effect of our eating habits on our environment. Senator Kamala Harris said she would change the dietary guidelines of this country to reduce the amount of red meat Americans can eat. Well, I've got some red meat for you. We're not going to let Joe Biden and Kamala Harris cut America's meat.
See, you know what? He dropped the ball. Because Trump would have said, I got some sausage for you. He would have said sausage, and then everyone would have went, what are you talking about? It's a woman. You can't say that. He'd go, what am I talking about? I always say sausage.
We have that last portion one more time. I want to make sure it rivals the Nancy Pelosi. People are going to do what people are going to do. Yeah.
Well, I've got some red meat for you. We're not going to let Joe Biden and Kamala Harris cut America's meat.
Gonna stuff that sausage right between her buns and make a grinder. Gonna grind that bun with that sausage.
I don't understand. Is there nobody in his orbit who said to him this didn't play? Do you think he tried? Do you think he practiced that? Because it has a little bit of a feel of...
It's got an element of
it's you,
sir, not John Kennedy. Those bites have to be rehearsed. I don't mean rehearsed, but they have to be preloaded as somebody who's done a fair bit of this stuff, like all the roasts on Comedy Central and stuff. You're preloaded with those. So
we're not going to let them cut America's meat.
Sometimes you preload those things and they come out in a little jumbled order. Like you have it in your head, like, oh, this is going to be a good turn of phrase here or whatever. And they come out a little bit different than you had them in your head. That's the only excuse I can make for the man. I didn't know he was a talk show host.
Yeah, a radio talk show. I did one in Indiana, I think, and I think it was carried nationally or syndicated.
And that was before he was governor, huh?
I think so, or after.
Because it's kind of there's talk show hosts. And then they're like X's and O's with Coach Johnson. And then that's Sunday night after the game. And but that guy's not a talk show host. He's a coach.
I always think of those guys as this is how we're going to funnel more money to you that's not being paid by the public university.
Right. He ran for congressional seats in 88 and maybe before that. And then in 90, he became a talk show host. And then in 94, in 2000, he was finally elected. So he was a radio host from 94 to 99.
Yeah. Also, Kamala, from what I gather from her, watching some of the Senate stuff and some of the debates, she will say anything in front of anybody. And obviously, when that kind of decorum is out the window, that adds heat to the debate. And she will go there. I don't know that he will go there, but she will go there.
I don't know. I mean, this is a guy, by the way, who apparently never eats a meal with anybody who's not his wife if they're female. So it's a whole different, Paulette would probably like that. I don't know, but.
All right, let me hit Tommy John, and then we'll bring it home. The secret to staying sweat-free this summer, Tommy John, summer-ready, ultra-breathable underwear and bras as well, cool cotton underwear for men and for women. like having your own on-body AC unit made from premium natural Pima cotton for enhanced airflow to evaporate sweat fast. I'm telling you, it is dog days out here. It is hot. You go out for a hike or walk or hit the rowing machine. You work up a lather, and then the Tommy Johns, which I always wear, they just dry on you. I just walk around the house. Next thing you know, they're dry down there. They have lounge pants. They have lazy day joggers.
You wear them when you jump in the pool?
Yeah, I do. That's
so do I.
It's
I don't know why, but it's better than a swimsuit.
It is better, and it dries faster, much faster. They got the best pair you'll ever wear. It's free guarantee. Right, Gary?
That's right. For a limited time, go to TommyJohn.com/Adam to get 20% off site-wide. That's TommyJohn.com/Adam for 20% off site-wide. TommyJohn.com/Adam. See site for details.
Are you still going to do Salt Lake City October 2nd and 3rd? Are you?
Yeah, I think
okay,
so.
Make sure you talk to me that week.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Oh, the jet.
Make sure you talk to me. I may be in Salt Lake City and have to take you along.
Well, I'll treat you to a low test beer, a 4.0 beer. There's a place that I'll take you. Where do you stay when you're in Salt Lake City? You go on the private jet. You bring your own hooch.
Yeah, where do you stay when you're in Salt Lake City?
Plus, I think Salt Lake eliminated that recently.
Yeah,
what they do is you can go from a 4.0 alcohol like max on the beer to like a 4.4 or something with some seasonal change.
Yeah, but it's even worse than that.
It's worse than that. You go down. Last time I was there, I ordered a fucking martini, and the waitress was like, "Yeah, you're not going to like it."
Yeah,
and I'm like, "What do you mean? Just make a martini?" She's like, "Yeah, we make ours with bezelnut juice and the tears of a virgin." Like, just make a martini.
You can't get more than an ounce and a half at a time, and you can't have more than 2 in an hour and a half.
I know.
mean, it's just when I was in trial there, I just at a certain point gave up drinking. I just said It's not worth it. I don't want to have to be like a scofflaw in order to have a decent drink.
Well, the good news is with the private jet, you put whatever you want in your bag. You put a Coors Party Ball and a kegerator and a handle of a jack, and you hit that tarmac. Yeah. That's the point. Did I tell you this? I didn't tell you. I was talking about it on my show, but I was flying Southwest, and they don't serve anything on the plane anymore.
Yeah,
and
I
was flying like a 4-hour flight. I was going to Chicago or something like that. So I got a flask. So I filled the flask up. I should have flown the plane with my flask. I go through LAX. They're like 7 ounce. 7 ounce. You got it.
So did you chug?
The guy said, go outside, go dump it out, or go dump half of it out.
Right.
You get 3.5 in. I said, how? It's a metal flask with the opening the size of a straw at the end. How are you going to determine if it's half full or half empty? He said, I'll know. I said, I'll weigh it in his hand. You know what I mean?
Just like this. Right.
So I go, okay, well, I'll want to just dump it out right here into this trash can. I went through security already. I said, we'll just keep going. He said, no. You got to do in that one on the other side of security. Go back out, dump it out there, and then go back through security with the half flask. Okay. I went 7:30 in the morning. I went through. I was standing by the trash can. I thought, what am I dumping out?
Why am I dumping out booze?
So I drank the booze. Right. I was shaking it. I was looking at it. Take another little hit off it. 7:30 in the morning. I put the thing back on. Now I go back through security. Mike has all my bags and backpack that already went through. All I got is a flask. I have my ticket and a flask. I'm just walking through there. And everyone's looking at me because now I'm putting the flask in the doggy bowl that's going through the thing. God. And everyone's looking at me like, you don't want a toothbrush, extra pair of socks?
Just my flask.
Just traveling alone with my flask. And not only when I went through the security, I didn't get directed to the line I went through already with the guy who busted me on the flask. I went to the right. I was 7 rows over. Those people had no context for what I was doing.
But did they let you through?
I went through. They never picked up the flask. They never looked at the flask. They never asked if I talked to anybody about the flask. The guy who told me to dump it out, I never saw that guy again. He was just on the other side, and I just went right through. It was a complete
he was punking
dance.
you.
He could.
He could have been
worked.
punking you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, That's my flash story, and I'm sticking with it. You got a plug, Mark?
I do. Capri, Southampton. We've got, if you're in Southampton, go by Naya. It's a pop-up restaurant. It's fantastic. Palm Springs this weekend is going to be something. Go by there. Or Gary's favorite place, Casa Tropicana in San Clemente, right by the pier, Ocean View. Any of those? Tenny. Engine Company 28, we now serve outside, and if you bring your own Uzi, you can protect yourself.
And I'll bring my own Uzo on the next flight. You bring your Uzi down.
Right. If you're going to Engine Company, bring an Uzi. If you're going to Tenny, bring Uzo. That's good. I'm going to start. That'll be our new motto. Thank you.
And you can go to adamcarolla.com because I'm doing a bunch of live shows around the country. Until next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garrigus saying mahala.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.